start. So in the meantime, let us know where you are joining us from, and please get as cozy and comfortable as you possibly can.
Well, just to start things off, this is Dave Mitchell. I'm joining from Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, we're putting our names in the chat right now.
Yeah. So we've got folks from Colorado, Leawood, Casey Moe, Leavenworth, Lenexa, Miriam. Terrific. I don't think there's 17 locations in the chat, are there? Overland Park, hello. Fantastic. All right. Oh, Holt, Missouri. All right. There's more coming in. Overland Park, Lee Summit, Liberty. Okay, terrific. All right, it is 7:05. Oh, you can't see me, can you? Hello, it is 7:05. Thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and get started. Please make sure that you are on mute as we start. There will be an opportunity to share, and I'll let you know that so you can unmute yourselves. But just to cut down on background noise, if you could have yourselves muted, that would be terrific.
Mary,
there's going to be an
intro here.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Welcome. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Chad Cooper. I'm the Executive Director of Sustainable Sanctuary, and I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for a program that I know will be thoughtful and thought-provoking. Our speaker tonight is Mary Silwance. She's a longtime friend of mine, and she has so much experience. She's been an environmental educator, a teacher, an activist, an organic gardener, a poet, and much, much more. And Mary, if you'll take a little time to share a little bit more about yourself, that would be great. I won't take any more time because we want to give Mary the most time possible. Mary can give some directions. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and we will address those. And Mary will kind of give you kind of her plan on, if she wants to take questions during or at the end, or how she wants to do that. So without further ado, I turn it over to Mary. Thanks so much for joining us, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks, Chad. And thanks everybody for being here tonight. I want to just mention that there's going to be a little bit of technical glitches. I couldn't get the Zoom to come up on my screen, so Chad will be working that. So just please be patient as we sort of communicate around that. So Chad, next slide, please. So tonight we're going to be talking about deconstructing sustainability to reconstruct relationship. And I want to start by saying I first became interested in nature because that's where I experienced spirit, and I love being in nature. So that was kind of the impetus for me to get into sustainability. So next slide, please. So why did I have you start with that? With letting us know where you're zooming from and getting as physically cozy and comfortable as possible. Why did we start with that? Because in my opinion, in order to reflect rightly on relationship with our earthly body means we have to ground in the particulars of our earthly body, where it is located, our particular here and now. So I want to take a moment longer here. Where are you? Who is around you? Beyond the screen, what do you see, hear, smell, touch? Are you sipping or nibbling on something? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Which cardinal direction are you facing? What's just outside of where you're sitting? We're going to return to this bodily check-in throughout our time together because it's central to our conversation. Sustainability needs to center what sustains bodies, individual bodies, collective bodies, relational bodies, and our earthly body. So next slide, please. So how did I become interested in environmental work? Like I mentioned, my bodily, sensory, spiritual, emotional experiences in nature they provoked a response. And so I decided to get into environmental work. So what did I do? I started to work I worked on a blog. I started that in 2011. I did environmental education. I worked as a farm to school coordinator. I got really jazzed about creating sustainable practices for my family and in my kids' school. What else did I do? And I worked as a farmhand at an organic farm. Those are all the things that I did to demonstrate my love for Earth. So let's take a minute and let me ask you this. So you can unmute or you can drop it in the chat. But do y'all know how to work the reaction button in the like if you want to comment, you know how to raise a hand on the screen, right? Just you can nod vigorously or somehow give me a thumbs up so I'll know. So okay, because I can't tell. So if you could just give me let me know how you became interested in environmental work. Let's take a few minutes to do that. I'm not seeing any hands yet. Oh, there's a hand, Lori D.
Hi, I was born in Berea, Ohio, just south of Cleveland, Ohio, where the Cuyahoga River used to catch on fire in the 60s.
Mm.
So I've been an activist nearly my whole life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Lori. Anyone else?
Richard, Rick, why don't you go ahead and go?
Thank you.
I've always interested in this is Rick, I'm always interested in the environment, but really became convicted about it when I started responding to climate change related natural disasters with Heart to Heart International.
Thank you for sharing that. Deborah.
I think it was as a child watching the joy of simplicity in my my grandparents' lifestyle of composting and on the farm, just a simple small farm of using the manure as in the fields and all of those sustainable practices that were kind of routine then, and just the joy in their lives.
Thank you. Dave, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just, here in Kansas City, I just noticed that in the mid-90s, the winters started becoming a little bit milder. And to me, that was a definite, I noticed a definite change. And I started doing all this reading on global warming, and that's what got me really going on the whole thing, so.
Thank you. And Jerry, I see your hand too. Oh, before you say anything, Jerry, after you've spoken, please remute yourselves. Thank you.
Yeah. What I became interested when I read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And also after that, the book by Paul Ehrlich called Population Bomb.
Okay, thank you. Are there other folks that didn't get a chance to share how they became interested in sustainability? Just by a show of hands, did any of you have this experience that I have where nature was a place where you experienced spirit and where you felt perhaps most at peace? Jane and Marie and Sally and Celestial, and thank you for waving, Deborah. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. So thank you, Chad, also for stopping the screen share for that conversation. I appreciate you remembering to do that. If we can go back to the slides, that'd be great. And then the next slide.
You need a special treat, bud?
I would love a special treat. What's on tap? Sorry, I heard someone say that, so I had to comment. Okay. So like I mentioned, for me, my love turned into action, and these were the things that I did. Sustainable practices at home and with my kids' school. I worked as a farm to school coordinator, an environmental educator. I worked in green infrastructure. I mentioned my blog, and I worked as a farmhand. And then some things changed for me. So if you can go to the next screen. I started to question these practices because my life situation changed. My kids got older, so they weren't down with shopping at thrift stores anymore. And they shifted schools, so there wasn't this community of folks engaging sustainability at their school. The grant for my farm to school job ended, so that program stopped. There wasn't infrastructure to support the after school program that I was conducting as an environmental educator. So once the kids left the program, there wasn't anything to support it. And my work as a farmhand still had heavy inputs that were not sustainable. So it felt like there were these efforts that were not sustainable, even though they were all around sustainability. And this was really puzzling to me. I was trying personally and professionally to do all I could do to quote unquote save the planet, but it wasn't quite working. So if you can go to the next screen. It was more like this. I felt like it was a holy bucket, and that's HOLEY bucket. Because my kids wanted fast food and fast fashion, grants end. There wasn't knowledge. What's the point of knowledge if there isn't supporting infrastructure? People would read my blog and say, you make me feel guilty. And like I said, I didn't, the farm work was great. It was an organic farm and it was beautiful to be outside all day, every day working on it. But I was aware that there were unsustainable inputs to keep it running. And in green infrastructure, I recognize that our work was supporting flawed systems. So how is that going to make sustainability a reality for a just and equitable future for all? And I realized that it wasn't just me, like it wasn't just the programs that I was involved in that weren't working. So next slide, please. So I started blogging in 2011, and I just used that as sort of a random marker of when I started keeping track of these things. So the number of environmental defenders murdered continues to rise. In 2011, it was 130. In 2020, 227 were murdered. And that's just the reported ones. Earth Overshoot Day comes earlier each year. In 2011, it was August 3rd. 2020 was August 22nd. The first Earth Overshoot Day in 1970, it was December 30th. So we have progressively been consuming more and more of the earth. Plastic production continues to increase. So in 2011, 211 metric tons were produced. In 2020, 367 metric tons. I'm going to talk about these stats in a minute because this is abstract to me. Like, I don't understand what these numbers mean, but I'll talk about that. And yet the US sends 1 million tons of plastic waste overseas yearly. There's a car next to that because an average size car weighs about 1 ton. So we send 1 million tons of plastic waste overseas yearly. 1 million small cars. 50% of the products on shelves contain palm oil. And as you know, palm oil is implicated in deforestation. Let me go back to number 4 for a second. You know that China stopped taking waste from Western countries, but now that plastic waste is going to Malaysia, Indonesia, and other countries that are quite impoverished, who don't have a good track record of taking care of their own plastic waste, but we're sending ours to them. And then e-waste, I have to mention it because we're all reliant on computers, increasingly so. E-waste in 2011 was 41.5 million tons, and in 2020 it was 58 million tons. So I just want us to take a minute and kind of sit with that. Where does this land in your body? And okay. It got me thinking about these stats. If we think of it this way, these stats represent bodies. Thank you, Marie. Marie said in the chat, it gives her a heavy heart. Yeah. Actually, let's just go on to the next slide. I don't want to talk at this moment about what I was going to say there. I'm going to save it. Will you go to the next slide? So it got me thinking about how are we defining and measuring sustainability? Does it evolve systems? Have we changed systems? Does it create relationships? How does it feel in our body? And I'm grateful that Marie mentioned that it gives her a heavy heart, because yes, it gives me a heavy heart as well. And remember, I told you that I started doing sustainability work because I love nature. And where is the love in that? If things have gotten progressively harder on the earthly body and the inhabitants of Earth, where is the love in that? And this is why I wanted to start with sort of a settling in our bodies practice. Will you go on to the next slide? These numbers this is what I was going to say earlier. These numbers represent bodies. They represent human bodies, animal bodies, cultural bodies, communal bodies, and our earthly body. So if I think of these abstractions, metric tons, 50% of products on shelves containing palm oil, I'm thinking of land spaces that used to be habitat, that used to be filled with ecosystems and people and culture and relationships and life. Everything on this slide impacts bodies. Oh, and bodies of water. I can't forget that. The overconsumption, the overproduction, and the overwaste is experienced in bodies, within bodies. And so, as an aside, but a critical aside, sustainability work must be justice and spiritual work. It must be intersectional work, because we are talking about bodies and we're talking about embodiment, not just statistics. In the words of Mary Oliver, we have to be concerned about our soft animal body. Okay, so this again, I'm always thinking about sustainability and like why are we not getting it right? There's so many initiatives, so much effort. And this is kind of what I came up with. Actually, let me pause there. I feel like I just kind of gave you like whoosh, a ton of information. Let's unmute and like stop screen sharing for a minute. And if folks want to respond, that would be great. But I'm going to ask you to allow yourself, if possible, and this is something that I've been training myself to do for a couple of years now. Can I bypass the mind and respond from how this felt? Where do I feel this? Where does it land in my body? Is it in my shoulders? Is it in my gut? Am I clenching my jaw? Like, are my shoulders up to my ears? Does it make my hands shake? Where is this experienced? Unless we are speaking from that space, I don't know how we can get to the healing of bodies and creating sanctuary and safety for bodies unless we're able to speak from that space. So take a moment to just let yourself get into that. And then if you raise a hand, we can share. Shad, can you put us in a grid view?
I think everybody does that individually.
Oh, it's not letting me do mine. Okay.
In the top right corner, if you go, you'll see a little thing that says view, and you can pick speaker or gallery.
Yep, I'm clicking on it. That's all right. All right, so I can't see hands if anybody's raising hands, so someone else will.
Sally,
Sally, I see Sally raised her hand. Go ahead, Sally.
So like when I think about those statistics, it kind of feels like I feel it right here, sort of in my diaphragm, you know, like where your wind was knocked out of you, kind of that space.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it was interesting. I've never had that question posed to me the way you did about, you know, where in your body do you feel it? That was a very interesting way to think about it. And obviously I always just feel depressed and, or, you know, ready to give up or give in, you know, there's just so many negative feelings associated with all of that.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you said it's not just me, because you feel alone sometimes in your community or even in your family sometimes, that you're the only one that feels this way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Sally.
Mm-hmm.
June, I see your hand.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for putting these new frames on it. For many of us who've been working in these arenas, it rings true. I can't quite identify where in my body I feel it, but there was this tremendous relief just to have it named. You know, I think all the time about the millions of dollars that will be spent on recycling programs in Kansas City in the last 25 years. And people put more out on the curb than they did 25 years ago. And anyway, I'm noticing that I'm going into analysis and wanting to join you intellectually.
Yes.
Just one last intellectual comment is just the recognition of how we've built an infrastructure of professionalism around people who are making a couple $100,000 a year, living in really nice houses and really nice places, and the growing disparity between rich and poor is only recently begun to be addressed. And so I'm just glad you're naming it, and it's a relief. But now I'm feeling a congestion. Coming back to your question of it's in my throat, it's in my heart, it's in the sorrow for the news that 14% of species could go extinct because of the way that we are. That just came out today in the IPCC and so forth. And so it's a convoluted answer to your question. I'm glad that you're asking the question and that you're inviting us to participate in feeling it. And thank you.
Thank you, June. And there's the other side of this. We're not going to stay in that space. We live on a regenerative planet, and we must remember that. And what drew you to this work was love, and love is what is going to carry us through. Okay. I noticed someone had mentioned in the chat feeling it in their gut. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for taking the time to sort of sit with it. And if this is not a way that we are accustomed to talking about this, and if it's difficult and you feel yourself shutting down and are unable to go there, that's fine. This is a process. Sisters Pat and Regine, I hope I said that correctly, raised a hand. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Regine. I'm Regine.
Regine, my apologies.
And Pat's back there. We're sharing our computer and our screen. So yeah, I'm the one that said in my gut. It just it's like I think of the gut. I mean, the gut has so much to do with our health and our, from diet to now they're saying mental health. And I mean, it's on our survival, right? So gut is my feeling place. And I when you talk about bodies and people, we often think of, well, we give stuff to people, but in our society, we are throwing people away too with the consumption. And so to talk about people we don't see and their feelings and their bodies. Yeah. So I appreciate that, but to claim it for ourselves, our own body. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know if any of you are familiar with the podcast For the Wild. There was an interesting program about inflammation and how inflammation is one of the biggest problems globally around the world. And the presenters did a really beautiful job talking about inflammation of our bodies and sort of the planetary inflammation that we are experiencing. And so we may not be in the general discourse talking about these things in this way on a bodily level, and yet our bodies are experiencing it and living it, because our bodies are connected to each other. Our bodies are connected to our earthly body. And so yes, that's why we're naming it. That's why we're taking the time to just see how it feels. And we have to intentionally metabolize it. And we can do that together here. Thank you for being open for this. Okay, so let's just take a moment and take a breath. And like maybe shake out your arms or something, like do something if you need to kind of, shake it out. That's something animals do when they've been through something. They kind of shake all over to kind of get rid of the nervous energy or the adrenaline. So feel free to do that. If you need to shut your screen off for a moment to do it, please do. I'm going to shut my screen off for a moment just to kind of and mute myself because I might need to yell for a moment. If you need to do that, go right ahead. All right. Okay, with a deep sigh, let's get into it. Chad, can you cue up the next slide or put it up, please? So what you're seeing there is a house plant. And there's a reason you're seeing a house plant. This is how I started to conceptualize what we're doing in the sustainability movement. Bear with me. This is a house plant. It provides benefits to homeowners because it purifies the air, it's aesthetically pleasing, and it provides a little bit of humidity, moisture in the air. It wasn't born a house plant. It was born, I think this is a pothos, P-O-T-H-O-S. That's its actual, well, that's its given name. We don't know. I don't know what it calls itself or what she calls herself, pothos. So next slide, please. This species as a house plant is siloed. It does not provide or receive ecosystem benefits, and it requires unnatural maintenance, meaning somebody has to water it, somebody has to make sure it has the right relationship with light and heat and cool. If the leaves start to turn brown, they have to be clipped. If it starts to trail, it needs to be trellised or groomed or somehow managed. It needs external inputs to survive. It can only self-propagate, well, it can only propagate with help from an external force. And the only species that it serves is the person who owns it. It doesn't even serve itself. One of the tenets of the environmental movement of the global north is that individual efforts will turn into collective good. But what we've been doing is engaging in siloed efforts, which is not the same as individual efforts. We have been behaving very much like this houseplant. Let me explain by comparison. Will you do the next slide? This is these are dandelions, one of my favorite species of plants. These are individual species within an ecosystem that provide and receive benefits and are regenerating. So I don't know if you know about sunflowers, dandelions, but let me geek out for a moment. She prevents soil erosion. She breaks up clay because of her deep taproot, which means she infiltrates water, which helps us with runoff. She makes calcium available for other plants. She increases the soil mineral content for other plants, which helps, like if you grow fruits or vegetables, she helps them. She supports pollinators because she's one of the first things that shows up in the spring. And so she increases biodiversity. And that's not even mentioning the like multitudinous health benefits she has for humans. And I would extrapolate that if she has health benefits for humans, human mammals, then she probably has health benefits for other mammals as well. This is what individual efforts creating collective good looks like. An ecosystem's approach is how we need to determine whether our solutions are worthwhile. Any comments on that? Do I need to explain this distinction more between siloed and individual? Yeah, June, go ahead.
Could you repeat the last statement about the criteria for evaluating our sustainability efforts? That was such a powerful statement.
I'll try.
Oh.
I don't remember exactly what I said. So this is what I think I said, this is what individual good looks like. Individual efforts creating collective good looks like. This ecosystem's approach is how we need to determine whether our solutions are worthwhile. Was that it?
Yeah.
We'll get to it some more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk around this a little bit more so it'll become clearer. Okay, so any other questions, comments? If you can drop it in the chat, that would be great. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, I realized I doubled the slides. Okay, next one after that. So siloed species coexisting are not a regenerative ecosystem. So what you have in this picture are a bunch of different potted plants coexisting, but they are not a regenerative ecosystem, not unlike different sustainability initiatives that are coexisting like a suite of actions. They're asynchronous and not coherent like an ecosystem. Similarly, siloed solutions coexisting are unsustainable fundamentally. Remember how plants in this setting require external inputs to keep them going? That's the same with sustainable solutions. Tim, what did you say? We can best advocate for sustainability when we are living beautiful, sustainable lives. Yeah. However, beautiful, sustainable. So, okay, I want you to say more what you mean by that. I was living a beautiful, sustainable life when I was a stay-at-home mom. When I got divorced and became a full-time mom of three, full-time working mom of three, I could not sustain a beautiful, sustainable life because I did not have the time or the capacity to engage the sustainable behaviors that I once engaged in. And I couldn't control all the variables. Like my kids got to a stage where they weren't down with me hanging laundry out because they didn't like how it smelled. They didn't like the homemade lotion I was making. They wanted lotion from Bath and Body Works. Yes, they knew that it was toxic. Yes, they knew about, yes, they wanted Nutella, even though they knew about orangutans and palm oil and deforestation. So if you cannot control all the variables like in an artificial setting, the sustainability breaks down. That's why I'm thinking of it now in terms of siloed versus individual actions. Siloed actions in a manufactured ecosystem versus individual actions in a natural ecosystem. We'll talk more about that. Unless, Tim, if I've misunderstood you, feel free to unmute yourself and say what you're trying to say. Tim? Are you there? Oh, you want to, okay. Yeah, absolutely. We have to live within the context we find ourselves. Yeah, for sure. And I love that you said that so much, because I used to be one of those people that would go to events and like parties, and I would spend the entire time digging recyclables out of the trash and like shooting mean looks at people for throwing recyclables in the trash. I would be at a party doing that. And judging people. And so I love that I got a smackdown from the universe around judgment on that, because it wasn't helpful to anybody. And I wasn't aware of other people's context or anyway, I was not having fun, and I was making my daughters miserable. So I was not passing down the love message that got me into that in the first place. It got twisted. I don't know if anybody else has experiences like that. What Marie said, I still do that to my family. Yeah. I have a little bit of regret around that. Like there was just, it's funny how like that love for a thing can turn into fear, can turn into judgment, can turn into sort of being, I keep thinking of the word like a Pharisees, you know, in the Bible, where they're like these really strenuous or strident rules about stuff. Yeah, it's kind of funny. But I think there's a better way. Like it's not this dualism of you're either sustainable or not sustainable. I feel like since we're having a discussion, do we want to pause there for a minute? Because people are responding to this. So can we stop screen sharing the slides and then just go? Because it feels like people are wanting to talk here. We're not meant to be perfect. Modern Families, an episode about this with an environmental warrior. Yes. Oh, I've never watched that show, but I might need to look at that one. Dave, what were you going to say?
Yeah, just, you know, there is no such thing as living sustainably in this culture. You know, there's just no way. Like you pointed out, you know, it just is, there are too many variables, and it's just a question of, you know, you can try to live as simply as you can, but the reality is that you're going to have you're part of a system that is highly destructive to the earth. And you know, there's me, the only thing is to live as simply as you can, and even that is you know, that takes away, you know, some guilt. So, but yeah, there's no way to live sustainably within the culture as we have it.
Well, that's key, what you said right there, the cultures we have. Can you go, Chad, can you go back to the picture of the dandelions, please? The second one, I guess, since there's two in there. Individual species within an ecosystem provide and receive benefits for themselves and other species and are regenerating. No one is living small here. No one is trying to live simply and trying to reduce and contract themselves. As an environmental warrior, I spent a lot of time trying to do that, wearing things with holes, not wanting to throw things away, not wanting to engage certain things, because I was trying to not have a big footprint on the planet within the manufactured ecosystem of modernity. But what we see in natural ecosystems where individual species are allowed to be fully articulate, there's abundance here. There's regenerating, self-sustaining abundance that not only serves the species, the individual species, but, you know, in the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer, they're mutualistic, they're reciprocal, and they're regenerative. If our solutions are not doing that, then they're not really solutions. Okay, can you go to the duck picture, which is not this, it's after the one after that. Is this individual species or solution mutualistic, reciprocal, and regenerative? What you notice in this picture are bodies of plants, bodies of water, and bodies of geese. Are those geese or are those ducks? Those are geese, yeah. Solutions must support and sustain bodies. Natural bodies, not industrial bodies, not corporate bodies. And corporate, I mean by corporations. So, June, to your question, next slide. Does this solution create a regenerative ecosystem? Does it serve existing ecosystems? And by that, I mean natural ones. Does it serve various species bodies? Does it create relationship among species? And does it increase ecological literacy? So you can ask yourself, is it a dandelion or is it a houseplant? I'm not knocking houseplants, by the way. What we have currently are siloed solutions in a manufactured ecosystem. Do you want me to give examples of what I mean by siloed solutions that are part of the sustainability movement? Because this is something I think about quite a bit. You can, and I can't see you, so you gotta, yes, okay. Oh, there's so many to choose from. Well, we've touched on plastic, recycling plastic. That's definitely a siloed solution. It does not do any of the things listed. And it doesn't stop new plastic from being produced. So it doesn't change any of the systems that already exist. It perpetuates an injustice. And we're still offshoring. Do you see what I'm saying? Wait, June, is your yes? Yes, I see what you're saying, or yes, I want examples. Oh, it's so hard sometimes. Both. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yes, I would be happy to name some more because I think about this all the time. I remember reading an article a few months ago. My parents were members of Costco, and I ain't gonna lie, we go to Costco. And it was an article about putting solar panels on the roofs of Costco. And I was thinking about that. That's a great example of a siloed solution because it does not impact the systems that create Costco's in the first place, which is globalization, which is fossil fuel. Fossil fuels created globalization. They made it possible. And so it enables this globalized food chain to food system to continue. Is it any better that I don't think it makes much difference that I can buy oranges from South Africa from a store that has solar panels in winter. I mean, in the winter, I can go into Costco and buy mangoes or oranges from other countries. The solar panels perpetuate an unreality that does not, that is truly unsustainable. It doesn't increase ecological literacy because all of us who shop there can remain as ignorant as what the planetary cost of these things are. It doesn't create relationship between me and a farmer. I still get to be deeply ignorant about the entire process of how those items got to my store, but I can feel good about the solar panel on the roof. It only serves my species bodies, and it actually doesn't, because what they do to that food to make it shippable over long distances isn't that great for me in the first place. It doesn't serve existing ecosystems because when you think about the physical footprint of a Costco and how much ecosystem space that takes, you know, we live, most of us, that's why I had you drop down where you are joining us from in the chat. If you live in a prairie ecosystems have between 200 and 300 species in them. To have a parking lot, a Costco-sized parking lot and a Costco-sized building to serve one species, that's definitely a siloed solution. It's not an ecosystem solution. I mean, if we want to talk about species going extinct, we have to look at that sort of thing too. I have a 2015 Nissan Leaf. That's a 7-year-old electric car. The battery is degrading as they do. God, there's such a learning curve around electric cars. If you're thinking of ever buying a used one, please contact me and I will fill you in. Last Tuesday, it was 10 degrees. Because the battery had degraded so much, I had to drive me and my poor daughter back and forth some places with the heat off because that would degrade the battery too much if we ran the heat. And here's the thing, when I first read about electric cars, they were going to make it so that you could just replace the battery, but that's cost prohibitive. It costs like $6,000 to $8,000 to replace just the battery. I don't need the whole exoskeleton. I'm not saying that word right. I don't need the car replaced. I just need a newer battery, but that's not a thing. How is that sustainable? And what's going to happen to my old battery? And if I resell it, who's going to get this lemon of a car now? That's not sustainable. That's a siloed solution. And again, the siloed solutions work as a houseplant that are aesthetically pleasing. It makes me feel like I'm doing something good. But it's not solving anything, particularly as we know that the intense mining that happens to create electric vehicles in the first place. Again, we're talking about bodies. If Costco is taking up that much space, those are bodies of beings that belong in a prairie ecosystem that don't get to live. We're talking about bodies of children being sent into mines. We're talking about cultural bodies that are destroyed to create the plantations, to grow the food that fill Costco's. I can go on. Organic food and plastic that's out of season and out of region. I mean, the list goes on. Jane, go ahead, please. Yeah, that's right. The leaf just kicks it down the line. Exactly. And it kicks it down the line to even more brown and black bodies, right? That's who it goes to.
Yeah, this is Jane, and I don't know if my microphone is working.
It is. I can hear you, Jane.
Oh, okay, because my camera's not working today. So, Mary, I love everything that you're talking about. I don't think I totally understand it, and I really appreciate your broadening my perspective. I often think of solutions as incremental and somewhat transitory, as we have structural change and systemic change to bring sustainability and flourishing into focus. So can you comment on incrementalism and transitory solutions?
Damn, those are big words. Well, yes, I'm going to answer that in a roundabout way. And by incrementalism, you mean like small steps will get us there eventually, like the 2015 Leaf is not the best EV car, but then the 2022 one is a better, like, do you mean incremental that way? Or do you mean like we will slowly transition from one thing to another? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess I mean that there's no guarantee in the outcome, but as we take small steps, or even some bigger steps, we have some success. So maybe at the Costco, it raises people's awareness of the need to have solar panels, even though they're still going to Costco, which has a very big footprint and has consumerism aspects to it that are not copacetic with the ideas of truly sustainable solutions as you're presenting them. It's not copacetic to go to a Costco with solar panels. I get that, but that could raise awareness and more people could get
Hey, Mary.
solar panels.
Hi, Larry. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your question, Jane. So I hear your question, and I hear your question around what I hear it being is around this idea of the manufactured ecosystems. Do we have time to turn the manufactured ecosystems into greener versions of themselves? And is that a worthwhile endeavor? And so I'm gonna address that in this way. Someone says we don't have time for small steps. It's all beings and species of the global, yeah, the green revolution. Yeah, in real time, yeah. Ooh, let me get to that in a minute, Tim. I want to respond to that. So many good questions in here. Let's think about what we're asking when we talk about, you said incrementalism and what was transitory, like transitional steps, like kind of like trading wheels to get this to the next thing, right?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and
Okay.
I know there's so many facets of this. I don't want to dig down too deep in the weeds here, but thank you. It's really good.
You're welcome, and I appreciate your feedback and questions. I want to pause here for a minute. Actually, will you turn the screen sharing off? And I want everyone to, and can you make it, Chad? For some reason, I'm not able to see everybody for what I can only see me really big, but I can't see people.
Click on gallery view.
Yeah, I did. I've been clicking on gallery view.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, so you all will have to just fill me in on it. If you could, if I could have folks like go to where it says reactions and like I want you to be able to identify the raise hand button for the next thing that we're going to do. So I'm going to ask a series of questions. And if it's possible for you to, oh, I know what I can do. If you can, raise your hand when something applies to you in what I'm about to ask, okay? So the first question, I was trying to get this to work on a different screen, but it's not. Raise your hand if anyone you know is or has been in debt, medical, schooling, housing, or debt for a car. Raise your hand if, okay. Raise your hand, you can unclick the raise your hand button or click it again so the hands go away. Raise your hand if anyone you know has faced or faces a life-threatening illness. Raise your hand if anyone you know has faced or faces a life-threatening illness. Okay, thank you. You can click on the button again. Raise your hand if anyone you know relies on daily medication. Actually, I'm going to pause for a minute. If you could indulge me in this, since there's so many different icons, why don't you populate your screen with icons for the questions instead of raising a hand and taking it down? So the first question is raise your hand if anyone you know is or has been in debt, medical debt, schooling, for housing, or for a vehicle. Raise your hand for that. And just keep your hand raised. And then if you can click on another icon, has faced or faces a life-threatening illness, click on another icon for it. It could be the heart, it could be the thumbs up, it doesn't matter. Raise your hand if anyone you know relies on daily medication. You can click on another icon if that's applicable to you. Raise your hand if anyone you know has an addiction to substances or behaviors. Usually we think of addiction as drugs or alcohol, but it could be multiple things, shopping.
Mary, I think you only let us have 2 icons.
Oh, dang it. It was such a good idea. I was like, oh, we can populate screens with this. Okay, moving on. Thanks, Chad. Raise your hand if anyone you know lives with pain, emotional pain, physical pain, relational pain. Raise your hand if anyone you know has stayed in a relationship, a job, a city, state, or country because of insurance or debt. Raise your hand if anyone you know has been evicted. Raise your hand if anyone you know feels unsafe where they live. Raise your hand if anyone you know doesn't have access to dignified education, housing, food, or opportunities. I'll read that one again. Raise your hand if anyone you know doesn't have access to dignified education, housing, food, or opportunities. And raise your hand if anyone you know has put aside their dreams and desires because of any of the aforementioned. Again, let's take a moment and just kind of sit with where that lands for us, those questions. The raised hand icon, if you couldn't find it, is under the reactions, smiley face with the plus on it. Where does this land for you? And if you have a comment about that, you can drop it in the chat. June says lower chest and the belly. Yes. Yeah. So we're at a point where we have to decide, are we invested in perpetuating the manufactured ecosystems? Or are we interested in reimagining ourselves as an individual species within other ecosystems? I definitely feel some tension too, June. That bodily awareness is good. I know it feels a little like it hurts right now, but you're feeling it, and that's important.
Mary, could you repeat that? Are we at a point where we want to make the choice to continue in manufactured ecosystems,
or do we want to keep propping up the manufactured ecosystems, or do we want to figure out how to experience ourselves as an individual species in life affirming, body affirming ecosystems?
Thank you.
Yeah. the list of things that I mentioned are a reality that impact our bodies. What is sustainability if we're not supporting bodies? So can we go back to the screen share? Thank you. We're down to slide 20. One more or two more. Two more. There, this one right here. So what is the cost of surviving siloed in manufactured systems? So not only are solutions like these plants siloed and not creating a regenerative, mutualistic, reciprocal ecosystem, but we ourselves are living like these houseplants. And what is the cost of that to us? So this goes back to your question, Jane, I think, about transitional training wheel steps, incremental steps. What exactly are we trying to sustain and save? And is it serving us? How useful is it for our well-being, for our bodily well-being? So the next screen. What are we trying to sustain? So here's a little bit of the state of the union that doesn't get mentioned on the news very often. This is the state of our bodily union. 66% of adults are on prescription drugs, 43.4% are inadequately insured, 40% live with a chronic health condition, 80% of us are in debt, 13.4% of us live below the poverty line, 12% have inadequate food. Another statistic I read that I didn't include said that 80% of us are malnourished. That means the food we are ingesting does not nourish our bodies. 70% only feel safe at home, inside our homes, which is problematic if 30 million, oh, I forgot to change this to a percentage, darn it, 30 million US citizens live in inadequate housing, which I think was 11%. 46% have a family member with an addiction issue. 45% have a family member who's been incarcerated. And over half of us have the experience of being lonely. What are we trying to sustain? I'm taking a moment to be quiet just because this is heavy stuff and I want it to land where it lands for you. But I want it to land. Sustainability has to be about our bodies and the bodies of others. Our communal bodies, our earthly bodies, our natural bodies. So I started this talk. We can stop screen sharing here. My Zoom is cracking me up. Now I see June really big and no one else. I don't know what's happening here. Well, I've missed you, June. It's nice to see you. I don't know what's happening. Let's try. Ah, there you all are. Hello. It's nice to see you and your names. This was heavy stuff. Yeah, I hear you. I started this talk sharing with you that I got into sustainability because I love nature and it is where I find spirit. And yet I have to wonder, what are we doing in sustainability if it is not supporting relationship and bodies? What are we supporting? Relationship with our bodies, with the bodies of others, our earth and our earthly body. So I want to close. Well, any thoughts? No, not thoughts, feelings. Any feelings around this? Where are you feeling it too? Let's ask that. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I just had a feeling just of white hot rage at the entire effect that we're having on the planet. So, but that's from a distance. I mean, it's I'm not sure if it's because I'm male or if just me, but perceiving that feeling is at a distance. And but one other thing I'd like to share is that I've been involved with global warming and more recently the sixth mass extinction for 20 years, and it's only been relatively recently that I began to realize that all of my rabid obsession with the whole thing was based. There was pain, pain that was the deep driver. But I was only conscious. I only began again to sense that pain at a distance. I don't know, not real long ago. 3 or 4 years, or it's the pain. The pain is the destruction of the world. Is what it is. So anyway, there you have it. That's
the pain is around the destruction of the world.
The killing of the world. Yeah.
So I don't want anyone to go away thinking that we are destroying the world or that we live on a finite planet. We live on a regenerative planet that traffics in abundance all the time, 24/7, 365. It sustains us. It provides us air. It provides us food. It provides us water. It provides us everything we need. We have created artificial ecosystems that are finite, that are crumbling, that are falling down. It is not the planet. If anything, she is evolving and creating a new iteration of herself. What we're experiencing, we are not, if she is making species go extinct, it's because she is creating something new. We're either along for that ride or we're going to crash with the manufactured ship that we have created. Those are our choices. But the earth is not dying. She is reinventing herself as she has done for millennia. Either we get on board with what she's doing or we too will perish, but she is not dying. And it is hubris for us to imagine that we are saving the planet. No, we can save ourselves. than other species and evolve in order to work alongside her. Those are our options, really.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I think there's room for both emotions there.
Oh yeah,
but yeah,
sure.
yeah, I subscribe to your evolving Earth. You are correct about the Earth, but there's a lot of destruction going on, and there's a lot of, and with all that is that pain underneath.
Yeah, and it is definitely an embodied pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah, I wasn't even aware of it until 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, pretty recently. And
that's the pain that needs to be unlocked, right? Like there's gold in that pain that can be liberatory. And unless we are addressing that, we will be, I mean, think about it. If generational trauma happens in families, then generational trauma happens in societies too. If we're holding on to this collective pain from from the world that how am I saying this? If we don't recognize and reckon with the pain around this, we're going to invest the solutions that we put forth with that same pain. That's how generational trauma works individually in families. And so if we as individuals are creating solutions and we're carrying around this pain, we're going to naturally deposit it into the solutions we create. That's probably why, since the sustainability movement has started 30, 50, whatever years ago, things have not gotten better. We want to blame it on external things like overpopulation or what have you, but that's not it. It's because we're trying to save systems that don't serve us. And we see that. I didn't have you do that raising your hand exercise just for fun. It was to say, hey, the systems that exist that are supposed to be supporting our lives, supporting our bodies, they're not working. So how do we step into something other? Our bodies need authentic ecosystems to thrive, not manufactured ones to survive in. Let me say that again. Our bodies need authentic ecosystems to thrive, not manufactured ones to survive in. Jane, is your hand up? Or is that an old hand up?
It's a new hand up.
Okay.
So I think what I'm hearing this evening has an awful lot to do with what sociologists call the human well-being. And the other thing I think I hear you saying is that this manufactured ecosystem, which I still haven't gotten a total understanding of, it is not going to bring us human well-being. And furthermore, I guess it's not even going to solve an ecosystem problem that we have. So I need to understand better what, I love your analogy of the potted plants, but I could start adding on to that. I need to understand what the manufactured ecosystem is, because it seems like it's everything.
Yeah, it's the constructed world that we live in that keeps us removed from the natural world. It's the idea that we as a species are above all the other species. That's an illusion and not at all true. It's that sense of separation from the removing of ourselves from ecosystems and thinking that we have a right to exploit nature or to utilize it for our own purposes. I mean, to me, it's the built world, it's the built environment, it's modernity, it's what we've created that really, if you look at the lifespan of human existence, it's fairly new, the way we live now. And it's really new, like, so industrial revolution on is mainly what I'm talking about. But then the idea, plastics is just 50 years, wait, it was in the 1950s. And the idea of continuous growth, that's super, super new. I mean, when you think about our history as a species, what we've created and done in the last 200 or so years is unprecedented, and we're suffering because of it. It has not made our lives, it has not made us more content, more peaceable, or more just, or more loving, or less lonely, or healthier. Yeah, it is everything. And I don't mean tweak everything. It means like we got to redo everything. We got to move out of this house. We're not a house plant, I think is what I want to say. June. Is your hand, is this a new hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just took a second to click the mute,
Okay.
unmute. I was just wanting to honor David in responding in a vulnerable way to admit the awakening that's been taking place for him. And I think didn't want to step over that. And that, you know, I love what Joanna Macy says about the pain that we feel for the world is that it actually is evidence of our interconnectedness, and that of course we're going to feel pain, you know, that during the sixth mass extinction crisis, of course we're going to feel pain because of our loneliness and our isolation and our materialism and so forth. And she brings it back to love, just like you are, Mary, that we feel that pain and if we shy away from feeling the pain, we miss the opportunity of the gift of the pain that is our love. The pain comes from the love that we have for this world. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring that forth. I love Joanna Macy's teaching, and it ties in with what you're aiming us toward, which is love and connection is what's missing in this chapter of human evolution, and celebrating that David and others in this space are waking up to their own feelings and owning their own feelings and naming their own feelings.
Thank you, June. I so appreciate you taking the time to do that. Yes. My apologies, Dave, that I did not do that. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, you went and you're riffing in a slightly different direction, and
I did, yeah. And the funny thing, that's so ironic because it was like this is all about embodiment, and then Dave mentions embodiment. I'm like, blah, and I went to so thank you for that. I want to oh, we've got 3 minutes. I want to close with a poem. A poem by Mary Oliver. And again, I want to invite you, you can turn off the screen because I want you to get all cozy and comfortable again like we started, and just sort of let the words kind of, you know, trickle through you, and maybe allow yourself to feel and imagine and I what kind of world she's trying to express here, and let this feel this in your body as much as you're able to, and just it's an invitation. So I'm going to read this poem by Mary Oliver to you, and then we'll close. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. May we be mindful and tender with the soft animal, with our soft animal bodies and the soft animal bodies of each other. Thank you. Thank
you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me this afternoon. We are straight up on 8:30. Oh my gosh. Almost, yeah. Any closing questions or comments? Thank you.
Yeah, Thomas Berry in his book, Dream of the Earth, talks about pretty much what Mary's been talking about, which is human species learning to live with the earth processes of the planet, and the coming ecological age. So it's my reading of him, I really think about Barry seems to really kind of zero in on what he was talking about. So for anyone who cares to read him.
What was the name of that book again?
It's called The Dream of the Earth. It was written in 1988 by Father Thomas Berry, and he's a cultural historian, and it was written for Sierra Club Books, and he talks about the need for fundamental transformation, where humanity learns to live with the processes of the planet, and that's basically what Mary is talking about, as near as I can tell. But he takes a very strongly spiritual approach to things, to this whole thing as well.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, and thank you, sisters Pat and I'm going to mispronounce it, Regine, for dropping the name of it in the chat. I also dropped in the chat a podcast that I find very that sort of has been really expanding my lens around sustainability. It's called For the Wild podcast. They interview people from all over the world that just have a different perspective that's really useful. One of the things that I really want us to consider is to not be as species centric as we have been. I don't think that it's accidental that there's so much loneliness that we are experiencing, and yet we see ourselves as a top and separate from everything else on the planet. Those things seem really connected to me, this pervasive loneliness and unrest and dis-ease in the body and our sense of separation. So if you have a chance, check out the podcast For the Wild. There's just so many really thought-provoking and challenging and heart-rending pieces in there. Thank you all for this time, and I'll turn it over to Chad.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. You've definitely given us a lot to think about, and I think just from some of the chat comments that a follow-up conversation would be welcome. So we'll have to talk more about that in the coming months. So anyway, this is not our normal first Monday. We scheduled Mary on the last Monday of the month. And so a week from tonight, we will be having another Zoom program. We'll be talking about food composting, and Karen from Food Cycle here in Kansas City will be sharing about the importance of composting. So anyway, with this warm weather and with the hint of spring, it would be a good time for you to think about maybe getting outside, doing a little composting, and we'll have somebody share kind of how that can be done. So anyway, so thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you next week. Yeah.
Oh, one more thing. I was going to do another talk next Monday, and that was originally scheduled, but I realized that it was not sustainable for me to prepare 2 talks in a week, back to back. So my apologies for that. I took on more than I was capable of managing. So a lesson learned. My body was not, it was like, no, you got other stuff. You can't do that. So there will be a follow-up in future months. So we will definitely let you know about that.
Yes, yeah. So Mary will be back, but we'll have someone else who I've been working with to do a presentation, and so that allows an opportunity for another person to share, which I think is great. So anyway, so thanks so much, Mary, for a great presentation tonight. I hope that we can continue to continue this conversation, and without any more, hope you all have a great night, and we'll see you next week. So good night.
Bye. Thank you.